Charli XCX, I'm sorry. A few months ago, I made a video called The Arena Tour Flop Era. I was curious about all these big name arena tours that were getting canceled left and right. The main culprits at the time were Jennifer Lopez and the Black Keys, but on top of those who canceled, there were a lot of people who were just kinda underselling. And if you went on Twitter, there were stands from all sides posting screenshots of super full seating charts saying that people's tours were just not selling super well. Artists like Future and Metro Boomin had Drake fans going on Twitter and going crazy. There were a ton of examples. And just as a quick TLDR for people who didn't see that video, some of the biggest reasons for the struggles that I came up with came down to tickets just being too expensive. And a lot of that came down to the greed of companies like Live Nation and Ticketmaster or their competitor AEG and AXS. There were other factors like the rising cost of gas, the cost of renting equipment that you need for arena tours, things like buses, and then also trained personnel who can make sure the show goes on well. But, plenty of comments were right, and they were like, it's Ticketmaster's fault. But it is a little more complex than that. If you're interested, I'll put the video in the description. But one of the examples that I referred to of a tour that was underselling and people were talking about it on Twitter was the Charli XCX and Troye Sivan Sweat tour. They each had a project to promote, and for Charli it was Brat, which came out in June, and for Troye it was Something to Give Each Other, which came out last year. And the reason why I talked about that tour is because it was a great example of a phenomenon that I was noticing, where a tour was doing incredibly well in some markets, big markets like New York and Los Angeles. Those shows on the tour were sold out pretty much after it was announced immediately, and resale prices were insane. But other stops on the tour like Columbus, Ohio, or even other pretty big cities like Philly and Boston were not sold out. And they were lagging behind in sales, and people on Twitter were talking about it. And it got to the point where some people were even advocating for people who lived in cities like New York or LA to travel to Columbus because the all-in price of flying there, finding a place to stay, and getting 2 tickets to the show might have been cheaper than resale for the floor in New York. And that's not a phenomenon that's exclusive to Charli and Troye Sivan. That's something that we've seen with bigger tours like Taylor Swift's Eras Tour or Beyonce's Renaissance Tour. But here we are, it's fall, the tour has started, and I think an apology is owed, because I was not familiar with their game. Shows that were not particularly close to selling out at the time that I made that video are now very sold out, with resale prices out the roof. I'm writing this on September 25th, although this video won't come out until a little later, but the Philadelphia show was tonight, and it's sold out, and it cost $200 to get in. And this was the show that I used as an example with $50 tickets just 2 months ago. It's not just Philly. On Thursday they play Baltimore, sold out. On Saturday they play Boston, sold out. Resale prices are even higher than Philly's. Chicago on Monday the 30th is sold out with tickets going for almost $200 as well. If you wanted a chance to see the tour for face value, it looks like Nashville on Wednesday, October 2nd, or the day after this video comes out, still has some tickets left for face value. However, all of the tickets left are side view, which means you won't get as good of a view as everybody else, which is probably why they're still available. And I noticed a similar trend with all the other shows that weren't sold out. Most of the tickets that were left, if not all of them, were either side view, obstructed view, limited view, options that weren't exactly super appealing. Even the Columbus show, which I made a whole example out of explaining why artists make stops in smaller markets, it already happened and it looked like it was close to selling out, if not sold out. Someone on Reddit was posting hoping that the prices would go down, and people were offering to sell their tickets, and both of those are signs that there were no face value tickets left. And when you see footage from the tour, it's no wonder that it's sold out. The show looks amazing. They're bringing out all sorts of guests, getting good reviews from fans and critics alike, and everybody seems to be having a good time. I can't escape seeing clips of this show no matter which social media app I open, no matter where I go on the internet. Bam, I'm confronted with another video from this tour. They even went viral when this one girl came out to do the Apple TikTok dance that she came up with, and then another girl interrupted her. This is a must-see event for fans of Charli and Troye Sivan, or just people who are fully in on the Brat zeitgeist of 2024. And to be honest, I didn't really mean to doubt her or Troye. And I actually kind of wanted to go counter to the narrative that you see on Twitter. And I wanted to show people that even if every stop on a tour doesn't sell out, it doesn't mean that the tour is a flop or a failure. Artists pay really high costs to rent all the arena equipment, and so that's a big startup cost up front. So they make that money back by doing as many stops as they can. And sometimes they get guarantees from promoters like Live Nation who are gonna do that whether or not the show sells out or not. I go into way more depth in the video if you wanna watch that. I'm not gonna go back on that tangent right now. Either way, at the time there was a narrative that the Sweat Tour was struggling. And it's clear today that even if that was the case back then, They figured it out. And what I want to talk about today is how they managed to pull that off. I want to look at how Charli particularly played her cards right to set herself up for success, not just on this tour, but in the future. And I want to go a little bit further into what planning a tour really looks like, how artists strategize what venues they're going to play and when they're going to play them. How much risk are they taking on? How do they thread the needle? We're going to talk about all that, and it won't just be about Charli either. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on in the touring world. But before we get into all that, if you like videos on music like this one, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe. I post a video every week. If you want to see them early, go to my Instagram, HADJI Gaviota, throw me a follow, and join my broadcast channel. I post the links to all my videos one day early in the broadcast channel. Also want to say thanks to everybody who's checked out me and Rob Apollo's new song, Come On Bruh. If you hear the instrumental in the background, you like that, it kind of gives you an idea of what it sounds like. I'm going to put the link to the video in the description. Got more music coming this month as well. In Los Angeles, I have a show on October 23rd. I'm not 100% sure if it will have been announced by the time that I do this video, but October 23rd, put that in your calendar. It's happening. All right, back to the video. Let's start with the tour's announcement. In April, Charli and Troy announced their joint Sweat tour. It's a true co-headlining bill, so they're headlining together. One of them is not the opener. They're both the headliner. I've also done a video on openers if you want to learn more about that business. You know, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. But basically, the two figured that if they combined forces, they might be able to fill arenas together, or at least come a lot closer than they would by themselves. Arenas usually seat somewhere between like 10,000 to 25,000 people. They vary a little bit, but there's a general shape, in the United States at least. On Charli's last tour before this, the Crash Tour, she played venues like ballrooms and theaters, which are mostly somewhere between 1,000 to 2,500 people. Although she also played some bigger venues like the Greek Theater in Los Angeles, which is almost 6,000 people. Moving up to arenas from theaters, though, would mean she's gonna need anywhere from 2 to 5 times as many tickets sold at all these stops. Charli has a die-hard fan base who will show up to every tour, every DJ event that she does. But to fill an arena, she was either gonna have to expand that fan base a lot or share the bill with someone who might bring in some other people. It's really hard to make the jump to arenas from theaters, especially in 2 years, and plenty of artists never do it at all. So with this context, rather than take the biggest risk possible and just try to do arenas on her own or with openers, at a time when a lot of arena tours were, underperforming a little bit, the immediate post-pandemic, like I want to go to every show possible boom has kind of faded out now. I can't say boom anymore without seeing the Costco guys in my head, but boom! So she decided to hedge some of that risk by going on tour with Troy. Of course, it made sense for him as well. He had also last played theaters and ballrooms in the United States. It was a similar sized tour to what Charli did for the Crash Tour, although it was all the way back in 2018. And when his album came out last year, he did a tour but in Europe. So he still really hadn't hit the American market with his new project. And the two have obvious chemistry. I mean, they've collaborated over the years a couple times, like 1999 from Charli's album Charli, and then Talk Talk during the Brat era, which just came out. They both have a gay-friendly fan base, but they also pull from different corners. So when it comes to finding a co-headliner pairing, it seems like one that on paper would work. I talked about it in the openers video a little bit, but it's a science. And you want to find someone who's similar enough to not alienate the fans of the other, but different enough to where you're bringing in two different groups of people. And I think they did a pretty good job planning this one. 2023 was a big year for Troye Sivan. His single Rush was, to a lot of people, the song of the summer. So he's no slouch. But given that his album cycle was last year and all he's really dropped since then were like remixes, the momentum that he provided for the Sweat Tour, the weight that he's carrying, is mostly coming from his run in 2023. I don't want to downplay Troy's contributions to this tour because that seems unfair, but it's the elephant in the room right now. The Guardian's review of the Sweat Tour wondered aloud, what happens when both headliners have the catalog and the stage presence, but only one has the zeitgeist? And then they went on to say that, though a joint show in construction, Sweat was effectively a Charli concert, and the guest highlights of the evening were firmly from the Charliverse. I wanted to make sure in this video that I gave Troy his flowers, because so much of the discussion has understandably been about Charli. But at the same time, if we want to understand how in 2 months, this tour went from one where a lot of seats were empty to one where people are paying twice face value to get in and has become the show of the year to a lot of people, then we're gonna need to talk about Brat. And look, I've talked about Brat on this channel more than enough times over the past few months. When Pink Pantheress went viral for her comments about albums, I used the Brat rollout as a recent example of an artist killing it in the album format. When the popularity of the term Brat got so out of hand that Mindy Kaling was saying it at the DNC, I looked at the bigger picture of organic trends like Brat and how quickly they can lose their meaning in today's content slop, light speed internet, short form brain saute society that we live in now. Because I've covered it so much, I don't want to repeat myself too much in this video. And to be honest, a lot has happened in the Bratverse since the last time I talked about it, so I do have some new stuff to talk about. But for a quick summary, Charli XCX is an artist who, before Brat, had a diehard fanbase but hadn't quite made it to the tippy top, the upper pop echelon. In August 2023, the New York Times ran an article called, "What Happens When a Pop Star Isn't That Popular?" And they referred to Charli XCX as one of these artists, saying that she's settled into pop's middle class. They went on to say, "The streaming economy has essentially created a swath of pop stars who may never muster the virality or the major label support required to reach the upper echelons of the charts or sell out stadiums, but nonetheless have devoted fan bases and consistent income from touring and licensing." This wasn't a crazy out-of-pocket thing to say about Charli in 2023, but she has completely outgrown that phase of her career thanks to the success of Brat. As we saw before, she did theater tours that were successful. In fact, I'm pretty sure the last tour that she did, every show except for one sold out. But the jump to arenas, like I said before, is a really significant one. It was fair to wonder if it's something she'd ever attempt at all, let alone succeed at. Because as the Times article points out, artists in this middle class of pop, they make a very comfortable living. So why risk all that? But Brat was the perfect storm required to take her to the next level. First things first, the music was excellent. It's well written, and while Charli has been using forward-thinking production from the left of center pop world helmed by PC Music for a while now, the mainstream audience had started to catch on and develop a little bit more of a open mind when it came to listening to stuff like that. Her built-in fan base was still pleased with this product, of course. She used grassroots marketing to her advantage, like the Brat Wall in Brooklyn, and through these exclusive events like the Boiler Room show in February that people were dying to get into, which only makes more and more people want to feel included. We're going to talk about the concept of exclusivity in a little bit. The album's art direction was endlessly memeable, and the title Brat became an adjective that dominated 2024. Add on the fact that her song Apple got its own trending TikTok dance, which opened up a whole new audience for her. This was pretty much a best case scenario rollout. Just dropping one good album in a year barely cuts it anymore. But Charli clearly had a plan to keep the shelf life of Brat going as long as possible. She played the deluxe game, which sometimes can feel like a formality for artists, or a desperate push to get a couple more first week sales, or just a collection of songs where it's kind of clear that they didn't make the album for a reason, if you know what I'm saying. But that was not what her deluxe was like at all, and she cleverly branded it within the Brat format. And one of those 3 songs from the original Brat Deluxe, Guess, went on to be one of the most popular songs on the album once the remix dropped, and we'll get there in a sec. First, we got the remix for Girl So Confusing with Lorde, just 10 days after the deluxe dropped. The buzz for this was through the roof, because people suspected that the song's lyrics were about Lorde. So the two girls infamously decided to work it out on the remix. And if one remix with a megastar wasn't enough, she came back with Billie Eilish on Guess, and now that song is her most popular on Spotify. Now Charli is doing an entire remix album that comes out on October 11th, called Brat, and it's completely different but also still Brat. It's got some of the remixes that have already been released, but 11 of the songs still haven't been revealed. So while I was wondering if Brat Summer was over in a video, clearly we are firmly entering Brat Autumn. Brattum. Brat Summer, but it's a different season but also still Brat. And I think it's pretty clear that the momentum created by this prolonged rollout period was a big reason why the Sweat Tour ended up being a giant success. One of the biggest drivers for selling tickets to any kind of event is FOMO. People want to feel included in things. The Brat phenomenon of the summer was inclusive enough to allow pretty much everybody to be a part of it if they wanted to be, as we saw with Kamala Harris. And when given the opportunity to go do it live, it makes sense that the demand would skyrocket. And plenty of artists use scarcity and exclusivity when they plan their tours. Rather than just try to fill the biggest venue possible and risk the chance of selling out, they play smaller venues than they might be able to fill, so that they can create the demand for the next time that they go out and the narrative that they sell out shows. Let's look at Tommy Richmond, who I covered right after $1 Million Baby first went viral. Since then, he's gone on to release a couple more bangers, and he has an album Coyote that just came out this past Friday. Last month, he set out on the Before the Desert tour, where he played New York, DC, Chicago, and LA. The venue he played in New York was Baby's Alright, which has a capacity of like 220. A dude with a #1 song could definitely play a venue in New York that's at least twice as big as that, and I can think of them off the top of my head. And he would probably sell those out comfortably as well. In fact, I even saw Tommy play at Baby's Alright last year, long before $1 Million Baby came out, on the Curtis Waters tour. So to go as viral as he did, reach #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 just to play a venue that he literally played before all that, it seems a little counterintuitive on the outside. But actually no, the whole point, if you ask me, is to have a show that sells out in 1 minute like the Baby's Alright show did. If you believe that an artist has longevity, and isn't just a flash in the pan or a viral fad or just trying to get their money real quick and leave, then you have to move in ways that will keep the demand going up, and not just go for the biggest cash grab up front. I actually saw Baby Keem play the same venue, Baby's Alright, back in 2019. And even then, off the strength of Orange Soda, he probably could have played a bigger venue. But he picked something smaller so that he could blow the show out, sell it out, and build the hype. And now everybody who didn't get into one of the Tommy shows and saw the pics and the videos of it being a good time, which it was, I was there, it was great, they're gonna be first in line to try to get that when he plays a little bit bigger of a venue. You can tell he's moving like this also because the new album doesn't have either of the 2 singles that were big hits on it. He wants to be here for the long run and he's adjusting himself like that. And playing those small venues, it lets you build that hype. Also, very importantly, it allows you to keep growing. When Pink Pantheress first went viral, she went on tour in the US and played pretty small venues for what she could have done. Not only does it build that demand, but it also allows you to keep playing bigger and bigger venues every time you go out on tour. And you don't hit your ceiling too early. To see what happens when you do it wrong, another breakout artist, for example, Sexy Red, tried to do a tour this year, but a few months ago, she had to cancel a couple shows due to low sales. Touring data reported that only 37% of the 85,217 tickets had sold at the time of cancellation. And you know what? A lot of people reported this as a flop or a failure, but that still means she sold over 30,000 tickets. That is a ton of tickets. If she did smaller venues, she would have sold out some of these shows. And also the tickets might have been cheaper too. Maybe she would have sold even more. Where her team and her agency failed was putting her in too big of a room too fast. Because even if it was a success, even if she sold better than that and she managed to go to those tour dates and do the whole thing, where do you go next? Stadiums? Sexy Red. I love Sexy Red. I love Sexy Red's music. I listen to it in the gym. It reminds me of like some of the crime mob stuff I used to listen to when I was a kid. I love Southern rap music. I love women rap music. It's low-key up my alley, I'm not gonna lie. Playing stadiums for Sexy Red within like the first 4 years of her career is insane. Like, you're telling me that you expect Sexy Red to be playing the same venue as Taylor Swift, as the Rolling Stones? It's just not realistic. And so the issue with her doing arena tours is she might be able to fill 30 to 40% of an arena, which is very impressive in certain markets, right? But it's like, where do you go next? What do you do when you drop your next album or the album after that? Like, how are you going to be able to sustainably tour? If you're not interested in touring and you just want to make a quick bag, play a big venue, and go do something else, then I would understand it. But if you're trying to move like you have longevity, and as a listener, I love Sexy Red, I think she can keep making fire music, then playing arenas, it just doesn't make sense. And so you see someone like Pink Pantheress who played smaller venues at first, now she's playing these bigger venues, or she's, opening for pop stars, playing huge rooms. And she's moving with some strategy. And when Tommy goes back on tour, he can do something like that, or maybe even shoot for theaters. Who knows? Either way, Pink Pantheress and Tommy Richmond gave themselves room to grow, which I think is really important for a newer artist. And so where does that leave Charli? She's in an interesting situation because she's already in those big rooms, in those arenas. So what's next for her? I suppose doing a solo headline tour in an arena could be a realistic possibility for her. Maybe if Brat wasn't the smash success that it ended up being, after doing the co-headline arena tour where, things went reasonably well, but it wasn't the blowout success that it is right now, Charli easily could transition to just doing like boiler room style events, big DJ sets, which she did a little bit of this year too. But now, after Brat, she can do literally whatever she wants. But the fact that she set out for a co-headlining tour shows that even she didn't think Brat was going to be as big of a success as it was. Or at least to become the cultural phenomenon that has transcended her fan base and transcended the world that her music is usually in and become something even bigger. She was in an interesting situation before Brat because if she did a theater tour again, then she would be like repeating a level, which is not a cardinal sin, but artists love to show growth. Not just for business purposes, but I'm sure every artist has a dream of being on a bigger and bigger stage, right? Everybody wants to play arenas at the end of the day. You just want them to be full when you get there. So she had to take a shot with a little less risk and do a co-headliner. As did Troy. Troy was in the same situation, right? He's done a theater tour and getting into an arena is a huge jump for him too. So I think it was the perfect situation. And even though some things have changed, like the shows are still great, I think it works out. And the ticket sales are backing that up. So again, I'm sorry for doubting you, Charli XCX. Maybe we can work it out on the remix.